Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Trade Justice Alliance Sunday night webinar for July 15th, 2018. Tonight's topic is Mexico's landslide election, and that's going to be from a labor perspective. You probably already know that Mexico held an important election on July 1st, and the result of that election has put Manuel Lopez Obrador and his Morena Party with massive victories across the country. It was a sweeping rebuke of decades of crushing poverty, violence, and corruption, and as we all know, loss of labor rights, and a party that really was just out of touch with the needs of the people. So we do, of course, recognize that free trade agreements like NAFTA continue to play a major role in the loss of land by small farmers and diminishing union representation, and even fake protection contracts that undercut the rights of workers to freedom of association. Those are just some of the really bad effects from NAFTA and other free trade agreements. We know that also, as Mexico's workers suffer, so do our own workers in this country. So we should be really working in solidarity with the workers of Mexico and the people in Mexico. So tonight's speakers will address the political realities going forward based on Mexico's regime change and how labor and worker rights could possibly and hopefully be changed for the better. Tonight we're honored to host 3 trade and labor rights experts. And for the first time tonight, we are going to be welcoming Hector de la Cueva, the founder and general coordinator for the Labor Research and Trade Union Advisory Center, or CELAS, in Mexico. And he's also a national coordinator for the Mexican Network of Action Against Free Trade, or REMALC. We're also going to welcome once again our friend Manuel Perez Rocha. He is Associate Fellow with the Institute for Policy Studies, and he is also a member of REMALC. We will then also hear from, we'll have a labor solidarity intro by our good friend Celeste Drake. She is the Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist with the AFL-CIO. And we will hear from good old Adam Wiseman. He's going to be giving a tribute to Ed Schultz, the first, and he was pretty much the only news person to report extensively on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I'll just go over a couple details here, and I'll try to do it real quickly. For those of you in phone only, should you wish to enjoy the online meeting room experience, just go to tradejustice.net/webinar to join our online presentation. You can visit our website at tradejustice.net and our Facebook group and page at Trade Justice Alliance. We have only one rule for our chat box, and that is to please be respectful of our wonderful guest speakers and attendees. My name is Harriet Haywood. I am an organizer with the issues-based group People Demanding Action, and I am a coordinator with the Trade Justice Alliance Working Group. If you want to opt in to receive text reminders for future webinars, just text from your mobile phone, webinar reminder, all one word, to 917-791-1131. And so right now I would like to open the mic for Adam Wiseman. He is going to be giving a tribute to Ed Schultz, the newsman who died recently.
Hey everyone. Harriet, can you hear me?
Yep, you're great.
Great. Okay, yeah, so to begin with a sad note, many of us who were involved in the fight against TPP remember the ongoing frustration of years of essentially total corporate media blackout, particularly in the broadcast media, on nearly any reference to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Positive, negative, neutral, the media engaged in a really outrageous concerted effort to black out any reference to existence of this trade agreement at all, very likely because the corporate media had a direct biased interest in much of the intellectual property language in this agreement. During that time, there was one and only one shining exception in the corporate broadcast media, and that was Ed Schultz, host of MSNBC's The Ed Show and the Ed Schultz Show radio program. Ed Schultz was a passionate critic of TPP, an advocate for labor, and who spoke passionately about the threat posed by TPP and the failed pro-corporate, anti-worker, anti-people trade model that it represented. He took on single-handedly the work that should have been done by the entire corporate media of explaining and exposing the threat of this trade agreement, and had a profound effect in rallying progressives to recognize the urgent need to fight this deal. When all the other supposedly progressive hosts at supposedly liberal MSNBC had not a word to say about TPP, again and again Ed Schultz pressed this issue from many different angles, brought on many important guests, engaged in passionate commentary to rally progressives to fight this deal, ultimately culminating in the 2016 Democratic National Convention, where TPP was the hottest issue inside the convention, where delegates themselves held up signs and protested during the speeches of President Obama and other key speakers, and made it untenable for Democrats, any remaining Democrats, to politically untenable for them to support this deal. He was a critical voice and a critical part of the fight against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and paid dearly for that. It's widely believed that his opposition to TPP was one of the reasons why Comcast, a corporation, the owner of MSNBC, and a corporation that had a vested interest in language in deals like TPP, ultimately showed him the door, resulting in him moving on to hosting the news with Ed Schultz at RT. He also, his radio show wound down. He continued to speak out passionately on issues affecting working people and the danger of deals like TPP through his podcasts, which continued up until his recent and untimely death. So Ed Schultz is a person who we in the trade justice movement owe a tremendous debt to. He was a courageous fighter. He was someone who was not afraid to challenge orthodoxy, even in the liberal establishment. He was someone who, or the mainstream Democratic establishment, he was someone who was not afraid to question his own views. He started his public persona as a conservative and later shifted to being a progressive, at one time a supporter of the Keystone XL pipeline. Upon investigating the issue as a journalist, revised his position on that issue. So we should remember his courage, his commitment to honest journalism, and but journalism unafraid to speak with a powerful advocacy voice. And we should continue the work that he laid out. So let me begin this call by the slogan that many of us heard him say time and time again: let's get to work. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Ed Schultz is obviously going to be missed for his honest reporting. That was truly a rarity. So let's see. I would now like to introduce Celeste Drake. She actually probably needs no introduction on these webinars. We've had the great fortune of hosting Celeste numerous times since the early days when Liz Warren was running these webinars. And she worked with us as a team member for quite a while. She contributes massively to the trade justice movement. In fact, her life's work has been a quest for worker rights. Celeste Drake is a trade and globalization policy specialist at the AFL-CIO. She works to improve U.S. trade policy so it doesn't send more jobs overseas, and also to improve labor rights for workers overseas so that workers globally can race to the top instead of having global corporations push us to the bottom. Celeste earned a BA, a JD, and a Master's of Public Policy from UCLA. Welcome, Celeste.
Thank you, Harriet, and thanks for that really kind introduction. Is my sound coming through okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'm going to try and be brief and just give kind of a labor overview to the next two speakers who I think are going to tell really interesting stories and really important to hear. And I'll just sort of introduce NAFTA and where unions have been and what's going on with Mexico and why this election could really be turning things around, we hope. And I'm really excited to hear what the other speakers will say about it. So just a brief introduction. Everyone on this call probably knows, but maybe we've got some new folks. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, it's a so-called trade deal between Canada, United States, and Mexico, went into force in 1994, and what it's really about was not trade, but locking in economic rules that prioritize investor rights and prioritize deregulation. At the time that it was being debated, it was clear it was not going to pass without additional rules to address labor and environmental concerns. President Clinton, who had been recently elected, decided he would rather do side deals to address these issues than reopen the whole agreement. And these side deals were purposely designed to be weak enough that they wouldn't lose Republican votes that President Clinton was counting on to get NAFTA passed. So the side deals never worked. The standards were weak. The things that you could actually challenge all the way through the process were few. The process was convoluted. And the aggrieved parties, meaning in the case of labor, the workers themselves, were not in charge of the prosecution of the cases. They could petition, but then they lost control of the case, and it's too easy for governments to close complaints without action. So the labor side deal in particular, it just wasn't up to the task because you were starting at such a low point, particularly in Mexico. Not that labor laws are perfect in the U.S. or Canada, but that's a whole other story. And I think the best analogy is sort of the NAFTA labor side deal was like trying to mop up a flood with the proverbial roll of paper towels. You just couldn't do it. The one thing that has been really positive from the labor side deals is that the AFL-CIO and the UNT, which is the Independent Federation of Mexico's National Union of Workers, have developed a close coordination and relationship and have worked together in the ensuing 25 years to try and address labor rights in Mexico. And labor repression, unfortunately, in Mexico, at least as explained by our partners from the UNT, has really gotten worse during that time and not better. And it seems to be primarily because the Mexican government, since NAFTA, really has a new, much more powerful constituency, which is foreign investors. There have been so many new foreign investors, and they carry so much weight that the government is, really happy to maintain the old non-functional system and to keep essentially workers down to please the foreign investors. And in short, the system works like this for a foreign invested workplace. The foreign investor will buy some land. At some point, they'll come into contact with somebody probably from the CTM, the Mexican Confederation of Workers. They'll approach the investor. They'll sign a kind of a so-called contract to ensure labor peace. Unfortunately, the contract often doesn't do more than restate Mexican labor law. When the people who work in the factory maybe decide they want to form their own union, often that's the only time they find out there, quote-unquote, already is one, even though they've never met a union officer or voted for the contract or seen the contract. And when they try to challenge that, the system that's set up for who they can challenge it against in the Mexican government is rigged against them, and most of the time they cannot form an independent union. what we've been pushing for in the NAFTA renegotiations, along with the Mexican Labor Federation and the Canadian Labor Federation, on the labor front have really been two things. One, let's have strong, clear labor rules with effective tools that ensure they will be enforced right in the text of the agreement. So let's take these old side agreements that don't work, put them in the agreement, make them stronger, make them clearer, make them better, do all of that. And secondly, let's get some labor reform in Mexico in the first place so we can end this rigged system and really empower workers, and those who would like to form free and independent unions can do so. And there was some progress on this already. Mexico made some constitutional reforms that clearly go in the right direction on labor rights. And then earlier this year, there was a law that was supposed to implement the reforms that was not approved by the UNT and worker advocates, and they thought it went in the wrong direction in some of its provisions. And that was a big fight that the AFL-CIO and the UNT actually lodged a NAFTA labor complaint over it to say if this is enacted, this itself will be a violation of the NAFTA labor rules because it moves in the wrong direction. That bill didn't pass. It's still alive. There's a chance it will be brought up in the lame duck session. But really the best news that sort of happened out of all of this, and again, I'm really interested to hear from the other speakers, was the AMLO election. He's announced his pick for labor minister, who's a well-known labor advocate, the daughter of a well-known labor advocate. We really think that she's going to come in and truly fight for workers. This is a watershed change, and we hope that it will be positive for Mexico's workers, which means it will also be positive for Canadian and American workers. Because what NAFTA has done is it's sort of created, one large labor market where the employers can choose where they want to operate and under which rules they want to operate, and then, take advantage in whatever ways those laws allow them to. And the more that we can make sure that all of us across all borders have basic human rights, basic labor rights, and can work together to improve our lot, and that includes a lot of the work that AMLO has promised to do in Mexico regarding poverty alleviation, regarding addressing corruption, all of these things. That's going to be better for all of us. And, we are really in this together, and we're excited to see what happens. And I'm excited to hear from the other speakers. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak, Harriet, and I'll stop here.
Celeste, you want to, I made a slide for your call tomorrow. So
oh, perfect.
You want to give it a plug here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll actually be doing a call tomorrow from the AFL-CIO. It'll be about 45 minutes long, and it's really focused on kind of what to think about these tariffs, and are we in a trade war, and why do we have these tariffs, and what do they mean, and should we be afraid that our economy is going to go in the toilet, and a little bit about NAFTA and just kind of how to think and talk about these issues. So you can do it by phone only if you like, and there's dial-in information there. You can go to the webinar and you can hear sound through the webinar. The one thing that we don't have the ability to do with the way they're setting this up is to actually mute individual other callers. So if you want to send questions, you can tweet them to me, or you can email them ahead of time or during the call, and I'll get to your questions. And then we will record the whole thing and put it up on YouTube. But we're really invite everyone, and please get the word out. It's 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We know that's not such a great time for people that are on the West Coast, but this is a do-over of a call from last week where the tech folks actually didn't mute anyone. And so the sound was really awful, and we apologize for that. But we know this one's going to work better. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to plug that, Harriet.
Oh, thank you so much, Celeste. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on here. I'm also, before I introduce Manuel, I'm just going to mention briefly that there is another call on this Wednesday. It's a grassroots briefing with Lori Wallach, and that's this Wednesday, the 18th, at 5 Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And basically this is a call on the status of NAFTA talks and what will happen if a renegotiation is not reached by the end of August, and how we can strategically organize in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So it's a really crucial time when it comes to the NAFTA renegotiations. And in order to sign up for that call, you can go to tradejustice.net/GTW. And, I will get these slides posted on our Facebook group also, so you can, we're going to have the video ready probably by early next week. But in the meantime, you can go through the slides to get this information off of our Trade Justice Alliance Facebook group. So let's move on to Manuel. I can't speak highly enough of Manuel. I'm sure we've all read a lot of his articles. I just sent one of his articles around earlier today. Manuel Perez Rocha is an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. He's a Mexican national who has led efforts to promote just and sustainable alternative approaches to trade and investment agreements for 2 decades. Prior to working for IPS's Global Economy Program, Manuel worked with RAMALC, Mexican Action Network on Free Trade, and he continues to be a member of that coalition's executive committee. He has also worked for the Make Trade Fair campaign of Oxfam International. Welcome, Manuel.
Thank you so much, Harriet, and thank you for your kind words. Just want to let you know that I also received a message from Hector. Hector will be joining us at around 7 p.m. Central Time. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. I am here, Hector de la Cueva.
Oh, hi, Hector. Okay, great. You will be able to speak after Manuel. So thank you.
Of course.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I will leave the expertise on labor issues to Hector because he's really the expert on everything that has to do on labor in Mexico. I will try to give a broader picture of what this landslide election of leftist Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO as we affectionately call him, is for Mexico. It is indeed a sweeping rebuke of working class poverty, of corruption, and a generation of rule by a party that lost the remaining support it had of Mexican people, the PRI. Mexico saw an election with the most votes in history, and with 53% of the vote going to AMLO. You can see that slide that compares the electoral results within Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, who represents an alliance of his party called Morena, which means the National Regeneration Party, and other 2 parties that form this alliance, called Juntos Haremos Historia, or Together We Will Make History. They won by a landslide, and for the first time you see results like this in Mexico, of 53%. In comparison, the right-wing and left-wing unlikely alliance, left-wing, in comillas and in quotes, the PAN and the PRD only won by 22% or so, and the PRI, the official candidate, won only by 15%. The other candidate is not even worth mentioning, to be frank. But the large majority also in the House and the Senate are going to Morena Party, the party of Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador. And there is a good reason to hope that AMLO will be able to accomplish a lot, especially in the realm of building an internally based economy and overcoming endemic corruption. So, of course, you will face strong limitations in regulating in favor of the public interest, and this is what I want to talk a little bit in a few moments. But I want to continue showing what this sweeping landslide result means. And the next map, the map of electoral map, I don't know if you can see it.
Okay. Yep.
You can see
I've got it up now. Yep.
The year 2000, the year 2012, and the year 2018. These are the three last elections we've had in Mexico. So you can see in the year 2000 how the PAN, the Conservative Party of Mexico, dominated most of the north of the country, and the PRI still dominated most of the south and some states in the west. In 2006, it changed dramatically. The PRI received the first vote of punishment, and what used to be the party of Lopez Obrador took most of the states in the south. Then in 2012, the PRI, the official party, took over again and won most of the states of the north, and the states of the south remained under PRD, and some states in the east under the conservative PAN. These are the votes for the president. These are the total votes for the president in these three elections, 2000, 2012. Now look at 2018. The country has become brown, has become purple-brown, which is the color of Morena. All the states in the country, but the very conservative Guanajuato in the center, voted for Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador. This is just an amazing change of regime. And then the next slide, please. Right. You can see the both chambers, the both chambers at Congress. On the left is the Senate, and on the right is the deputies. You can see how Morena and its coalition has overtaken most seats, and this is also something very unprecedented. And I have to say that what's very important is that for the first time, the Congress in Mexico is going to have the most incredible gender balance, almost 50%. 50% are women for the first time in Mexico. This is an incredible change, and we can see also the political change in Mexico City, which is the next slide. I don't want to take much time, but you can see how it changed from 2012 to 2018, how Morena has taken most of what we call delegations or boroughs of Mexico City. The next slide is a bit clearer. It represents the different alliances, and you can see how the Morena Alliance is going to take 11 of the 16 boroughs of Mexico City. And then also, not only that, there were also state elections. And the next slide, you can see how Morena here in yellow, Morena here in red, has taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new states, including, of course, Mexico City, that will be led by Claudia Sheinbaum. For the first time, a woman will be the mayor of this super big city, Mexico City, with more than 10 million people. More than 10 million people, but I have to say that Mexico City is officially the city of Mexico is part of the whole urban area of Mexico City. In the next slide, you can see the state of Mexico. You can see the little hole in the middle, that's Mexico City, and the rest is the state of Mexico that traditionally has been governed by the PRI, is the bastion of the conservative PRI. And this time you can see how many different municipalities Morena has taken over the state of Mexico. This is where it's going to really be a pain for the PRI. That really shows that they have been swept over the board. So before this was just to show how important this election has been for Mexico. What a deep change. It's not only a change of president; it's a complete regime change. I think the elections of 2018 will pass in history as a democratic triumph for Mexican society. However, I have to say, although election day turned out peaceful, the election day was very peaceful, the run-up to the elections were not peaceful at all. 112 politicians, including 42 local candidates, were assassinated. And after the elections, and as for today, the country seems to be appeasing and experiencing some kind of untold harmony with business people and so on, and all political adversaries have accepted defeat, and the all political parties, PRI, PAN, and even the center-left PRD, from which Morena was an excise, are today licking their wounds and wondering how they will overcome a complete change of regime. but the business elites that only weeks ago were afraid of Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador promises that he will get done with what he called the mafia in power, have been reassured that he will also run a business-friendly government. So we're in that state now of how, in the run-up to the December 1st, when Lopez Obrador will take office, we're in that period in which it will be very important to see how Lopez Obrador really complies with many of the promises made to the labor, to the working people, promises for the environment and so on, to the indigenous people especially, and how he will deal with trying to run the country in a way that business people do not, wrong with awash with the money and take it out of the country and provoke an economic crisis. This is the stark reality we are living today. And we have to be very realistic. There are forces, and this is what I want to talk about, that are very, very concerned now that some neoliberal policies might continue. And I'm looking here, for example, and this is very important, this is a network we work a lot with, the Mexican network of people affected by mining, they call the REMA. They have declared that it is of fundamental importance to transform, among other things, the policies of economic submissiveness that have characterized the neoliberal governments in Mexico for more than 30 years. They say, and they denounce, the worrying expressions for them and for us of people like Mr. Alfonso Romo, who has already been announced as the head of the cabinet of President-elect Lopez Obrador, with respect to turning the country into a paradise for foreign investment and expanding the economic special zones, these tax-free zones for making big business and so on. So I think we have to understand, and I don't know how much time I have, whereas Lopez Obrador has never promised to overturn capitalism, and whereas he's also been criticized by the radical left for not using a Marxist approach to tackle poverty and inequality, for example, by overturning the means of production to workers and so on. And also Lopez Obrador has not used the traditional imagery and symbolism of the Latin American left, including rebuking U.S. imperialism. He will be measured very quickly on his success and his promises in alleviating the prevailing poverty in which more than 50% of Mexicans live, as well as the benefits to the indigenous people, complying with the San Andres Accords that the PRI and the PAN never complied with. And it's important that this new government really recognizes the major historical laggard that Mexico has, which is exactly the debt with the indigenous people that are the poorer of the people in Mexico. But also very pressing will be environmental issues and energy sovereignty. I think that the biggest achievement of Lopez Obrador would be to comply with his promise of separating economic power and political power, which have been increasingly intertwined during the decades of neoliberalism. But regrettably, and this is the point I want to make, Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador will arrive to political power handcuffed by NAFTA and other trade and investment agreements like the TPP and the recently so-called modernized free trade agreement with the European Union. These agreements contain the infamous Investor-State Dispute Settlement, ISDS, provisions that allow transnational corporations to avoid national courts and sue countries in secret supranational tribunals. The most common is the World Bank's International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, when these companies consider that a government action or regulation affects their respected profits. So to date, Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador will arrive to government with more than dozens of bilateral investment treaties, under which Mexico has already had to pay more than $200 million, basically under NAFTA and the free trade agreement with Europe.
Maybe I should go on to, should I maybe be on this slide? I'm sorry. Maybe tell me to go to the next slide next time.
Oh yeah, go to the next slide.
I think this is what we're talking about.
Next slide illustrates. Sorry, I forgot this slide. This slide illustrates the ISDS demands of investors against Mexico. So you can see many from Europe, and then it's in Spanish. Sorry, I promise that I will update it in English. I will translate it. And
it's not in. But
anyway, these are many companies that have sued Mexico. Already Mexico has had to pay more than $200 million. It hasn't had to pay more because Mexico hasn't been very bad lately with companies. But if Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador really wants to regulate in favor of the environment, in favor of indigenous peoples, in favor of overturning mining operations, overturning so many concessions, just to let you know that, for example, 30% of Mexico's territory is already concession to mining companies, most of them Canadian, but also United States ones. So he will confront, Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, will confront this situation in which if he wants to change, and he should change, and he will want to change many of the already concessions made, not only, of course, on mining, but also on gas, on fracking, and, of course, on oil. If he really wants to confront that and scale back these contracts, he will be seriously compromised. He's already seriously compromised by investor-state dispute settlement and the investor rights under NAFTA and other free trade agreements, notably the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? So I think that this is one thing that we have to have in mind in the run-up to the taking the presidency, taking the seat of the presidency, and work with Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador and his cabinet and make them understand that NAFTA cannot continue being negotiated under the terms of the actual Mexican government, because the actual Mexican government, the present Mexican government, does not want to alter the rules of NAFTA, the status quo of NAFTA. So it is very important that many people that we might have some access with, as it was mentioned by Celeste, we know people that are very close to him, might be part of his cabinet or will be part of his cabinet, like our friend Luisa Maria Alcalde, but there are many others that we have to have influence and impact to really change the rules of NAFTA if we want to make Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador government successful. Otherwise, he will confront like a wall, like a very stark reality in which the rules that have already been dictated by and accepted by the previous Mexican government will, in the end, handcuff the possibilities of having a successful government in all the realms of bringing environmental justice to communities and to people all over Mexico. I would leave it at that and leave more room for questions and answers, and above all, let Hector speak more from a labor perspective as well.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to be in AMLO's position, though. I mean, what a difficult position. So everybody, thank you so much, Manuel. Stick with us, please. We're going to have combined Q&A, and I'm sure that listening to Manuel, you all have some really good questions. So please hold them, maybe write them down, and then after Hector speaks, we'll have a combined Q&A. Thanks, Manuel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I would now like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Hector de la Cueva. Hector de la Cueva is the founder and general coordinator for the Labor Research and Trade Union Advisory Center in Mexico. He is also a member of and national coordinator for the Mexican Network of Action Against Free Trade, or RAMALC. Hector is an executive committee member and participant in the Mexico is Better Without Free Trade Coalition. Hector de la Cueva has been a member of the executive committee of the Tri-National Coalition, and that is between Canada, the USA, and Mexico, and that is for justice in the Maquiladoras. And also, he is a member of the Hemispheric Coordination of the Continental Social Alliance. He is a contributor Hector to La Jornada, and he lives in Mexico City. Welcome, Hector.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
First of all, I apologize for my very bad English. I will try my best, and I hope Manuel could help me if
okay.
If I can.
Absolutely.
And I also appreciate the help of Manuel with this general picture, this general framework. So let me get in first and on the general aspect. Since the labor view, in particular since the view of the new workers central in Mexico, we think we are facing in July 1st a very important democratic victory. The historical fact is that more than 30 million Mexicans, the majority of the electors, voted for a change, voted to the left, voted for social and political changes. It creates a new political and social situation in Mexico. That's the fact. And this new national situation opened a very important and good perspectives for social, political, and economic changes in Mexico. Saying that, we think we need to be clear that December 1st, we will not have a left government or a government linked directly to the social movement demands. We need to be clear this because we think a new situation in Mexico will open, and the social movements, in particular labor movements, have a big challenges to face. In fact, with all this great victory Manuel described, also we need to say that most of the members of the new cabinet announced by Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, and most of the candidates that won at the Senate or the deputy chambers or in the states, they are not coming from the social movement or from the left, but even a lot of them are coming from the same party that lost the election. It means the PRI. And also we need to have clear that now, after this big victory, everybody, including the big bosses, the big companies, the media, and also the very corrupt yellow corporative unions in Mexico are saying that they are with the new government, and they will put a big pressure on the government. That's why in the social movement and in the labor sector, we are ready, we are discussing, we are meeting, we are trying to build a unity front or unity
Hector, could you speak a little, either a little louder or more into your microphone? Just people are straining to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
So what I am saying is we are preparing for to face this big challenge because many things are in front of us to do. In particular, on international politics, there are some worry things. Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador had already said that he is agreed with NAFTA. He even is agreed with the actual NAFTA negotiators team, Mexican team, and he put together his own team for the negotiation of NAFTA. So we will see what is coming with NAFTA negotiations. And also he already talked about he will try international politics, like I don't know what the translation, the Alianza para el Progreso, which it was the U.S.
Alliance for Progress.
Yeah, for America since the 50s, 60s, right? And he said he will propose something like that, and he will propose something bilateral with U.S. government to develop Mexico and Central America. And we are worried if it could mean something similar like the Plan Puebla-Panama we had in the past. Well, so we will see. We need to follow very close. But let me get in on the labor aspect. Of course, one issue involved in the NAFTA negotiations and, of course, in the Mexican reality is to improve the very precarious situation of the working people. Of course, you have on the screen some figures of what happened with the minimum salary. It's clear that we lost in the last decades more than 70% of the poder adquisitivo of the salary. I don't know what to say.
Yep, wages.
Purchasing power of the salary.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And then the next level, we have more than 50% of the population on the informal economy. We have a lot of workers in the formal sector that have not social security, have a precarious jobs, no social security, and so on. And this situation even is despite the fact that the productivity increased in the past decades, and even the productivity differences between Mexico, U.S., and Canada are closer, but the salaries are very different more and more. So it's clear for everybody that Mexico needs to improve the salaries and labor situation. And even, of course, the problem with this is that the unionized people were reduced in the last decades, but also most of the Mexican workers are inside yellow unions, or worse in the protection unions or protection contracts. I don't know if you know what we mean with this, but protection unions and protection contracts means that they are ghost unions, mafious unions. The workers don't know their leaders, their unions, their contracts. So that's the situation, the union situation that permit the very low labor conditions. So we, in the next period, labor, the independent unions, the authentic unions in Mexico, we will unify to fight for improved salaries, for improved formal jobs, fight against outsourcing, fight against the neoliberal reforms that affected Mexican workers in the past. But mainly, the main target, the main objective that we have in the next period is to take the democracy we already won in the elections. The democracy we already won as citizens. We need to take this democracy to the labor world. We need to take this democracy to the unions. So we will demand, our main demand for the new government is not necessarily salaries or better jobs, but the main demand is let us free to organize unions, to elect leaders, to bargaining contracts. It means to respect the labor freedom, the freedom of association in Mexico, to permit the workers to organize free to fight for salaries, for better salaries and better jobs. And this is a political fight. It not depends of the big economic changes or big economic politics for the new government, but basically to permit the freedom and democracy on the labor world and for the unions and workers in Mexico. So we think, and it means that the new labor reform that we're discussing in the last period, the new government and the new Congress should take again this discussion on the new labor reform, focused mainly into dismantling, to destroy the old corporative structures and to create the new tribunals, a new institute, a new structure for the labor justice in Mexico. And around this new labor reform and to break the corporate control will be the main fight, the main struggle for the Mexican unions. To get them is very elementary, is to get freedom and to get democracy, to have authentic unions and authentic collective bargaining contracts in Mexico. So that's it will be the main battle in the next future, and of course with them to fight against to destroy the neoliberal structures and politics, which is the heritage of three decades of neoliberal governments. So we will face this, and we have clear that it will not be easy. For less than that, in other countries like Brazil, Argentina, and other countries, the right wing, the big corporations, they stabilize, I don't know if the word is correct, and break through democratic governments in the past. The fight in Mexico will be very strong, and we know that we will face the pressure of the old powers, the media, the companies, and the yellow unions. So we will face a big battle in the future.
Okay. Manuel? Hector?
Yes, well, I think I think it's not possible to get in more in details, but if you have questions, I will answer.
Okay. I'm sorry, my dog was barking, so sorry about that. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So yeah, it's a really tough situation in Mexico, and I think it's going to take a lot of time. There's been so much damage, and in the Mexican Constitution, it's supposed to guarantee a living wage, isn't it?
Right. Can I say something about the slides that Hector sent?
Sure.
Because it's very difficult to be speaking and at the same time control this thing. But I think it's important.
Can you see it? Can you see the slides? I wasn't sure how to move the slides.
Yeah, the first two slides of Hector show very clearly how the minimum salary in Mexico has dropped since the beginning of neoliberalism in the 80s, and then under NAFTA, to very, very, very low levels. And then the second graph, the one right after, explains what he was saying, that despite that productivity has grown in Mexico, that means productivity is giving more plusvalia or more profits to the investments or the manufacturing sector in particular. The wages have dropped, no? And then the third is how workers have been working more and more than 38 hours. A total of around 14,000 today work more than 48 hours a day. And then the next graph shows how the informal sector prevails. The informal sector means that are workers without social security, without any benefits, and are outside of the system really, and they're not part of the formal sector of the economy. So it's the majority of the Mexican workers, and so on. The next one shows how unions have, the participation in unions have dropped, and the next one is how actually strikes have become less and less strikes, because the loss of the right to strike in Mexico as well. So I just wanted to.
Okay, I'm glad you stepped in because I was having trouble figuring out which. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel.
Sure.
Thank you, Manuel.
Oh.
Yep. Okay, wonderful. Hector, did you have anything to add to that?
No. I appreciate Manuel. You explained the lights, but no, I think I already said the general what we are thinking here.
Okay, beautiful. Yes. Yep, I think it's going to be a long haul for Mexico, but I think it's really important for people in the United States to work and to work in solidarity and to let our people in our office know how important it is. Especially, we can really take advantage of it now during these times where we have so many people in survival migrations coming to our country. So it's important to connect the dots.
Absolutely.
So,
yep. I want to ask the people here about what do you think about the NAFTA negotiations, because we think Trump will retake these negotiations since July, right? And maybe to get in before the November elections?
We don't really know. Maybe Celeste would have something to say about that. We're gonna open the lines for questioning, and maybe Celeste. Are you still with us?
I am. I'm here. I didn't really hear the question. Something about NAFTA?
Yeah, I believe Hector was asking if they believe that they're going to try to get NAFTA signed before the election. Did I get it right, Hector?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even before the Mexican elections, I don't know if they will try before the U.S. elections.
They may. So it's unclear, right, because President Trump is so, completely unpredictable, right? And he contradicts himself all the time. The last thing he tweeted out was that there would be no deal before the U.S. elections. But, there are a lot of people that I hear in the administration that are concerned that he's just going to be impatient and at some point just wake up one day and give an order, I'm done waiting, get that thing signed. And so that's totally impossible to predict. The other thing was we were hearing several months ago from the administration that they wanted to get it done before the Mexican elections because, they felt they would rather deal with the pre than with AMLO. And our message to them was, this is not, if what you say is true, you want to get rid of ISDS and you say you want to increase worker rights and some of these other things, you actually want to be dealing with a different administration than the pre-administration. And so, who knows? That's the unfortunate thing, is that this U.S. government, I don't think you'll ever be able to predict anything except that it's unpredictable.
Definitely. But there is a huge issue right now over, the separation of families and migration. And, people are connecting. They're starting to connect the dots. The people in Congress don't really want to admit that it's connected to free trade and globalization and neoliberalism. But, I've been noticing, there are even some, middle people that are more in the center that are starting to question, and starting to, there have been letters to the paper, and that sort of thing. So, I just think it's really important for us. That issue is really super important to bring to light, just the huge problem with the neoliberal agenda.
Okay. Yeah. Are we ready for questions
I
from
think
the
we
audience?
we can do Q&A now. So if you all have questions for any of our speakers, please press *6, and then when you're prompted, press the 1, and you'll be put into the queue.
Okay. Our first question comes from caller at area code 317. Your line is open.
What I was wondering was, I asked this a long time ago with the TPP, but since it's a different thing, can NAFTA be slipped into a must-pass bill or something? Because there's been a tendency to see like a lot of bad laws created by doing that.
Oh, I'll take that one.
Yes.
Yeah, the way that a trade agreement advances currently under U.S. law is through a fast-track provision. So they don't need to put it in a must-pass bill. They already have this fast-track means it's sort of like going down a luge. When they say grease the skids, it's Congress is forced to vote. It can't delay. It must vote, and there's never been a trade agreement yet that's been defeated on a vote when it goes under fast track. One time.
And how do you just keep the pressure on these people to ensure that they don't approve it? Same as with TPP, just plaster the hell out of them.
Yeah, you just do the best you can and see if you can keep it from coming to a vote. And every time we've defeated a trade agreement, it's been that we've prevented it from coming to a vote. But I would say on the NAFTA, not that anyone should trust this president, but don't make a decision yet about whether there's a small possibility that what they do with NAFTA is actually preferable to the status quo. So there's an off chance this might be something we would want to pass.
With coordination, though, there's a lot more stuff like being deleted on Facebook. It's really much harder to keep the coordination that we had with TPP. That was possible because Facebook wasn't doing anything at the time. You could just basically coordinate all kinds of stuff, but now it's they're making that very difficult.
Hello, this is Liz King. I got two questions. The first one is that if you look at the U.S. government information websites, the official unemployment in Mexico is 3.5%. So that's my first question is, what are they talking about? And my second question is, so the formal employment has the Social Security and has the benefits. The informal doesn't. Are the formal employment, are those the people that are in the factories that have the benefits, that are in the factories that are, there from the corporations like Toyota and Ford and whatnot? And how does that relate to the informal, and is it the informal that is bringing the average down?
Manuel, can you, or Hector, can you speak to the difference between the informal and the formal economy when some of the polls are saying that the unemployment rate is very low in Mexico?
Primero, Toro.
Well, I will try. If maybe Manuel will help me.
Okay.
Well, the statistics in the unemployment figures not includes the people on the informal economy, but the people looking for jobs.
Exactly.
That's first of all. And second, the official institute that create the statistics use very a lot of tricks to present the figures. It means that they use indicator, you can say. ¿Puedes decir indicador, Manuel, o cómo es?
Indicator.
O una tacas indicator. If you work 1 hour the last week, you are not in the unemployment figure.
Right.
So,
okay.
You know, so it's a very tricky statistic. The real unemployment in Mexico is around 15%.
16?
16?
Okay, yeah.
15% in the real unemployment figures. But it doesn't include the total. I mean, after, don't take account of the informal economy, okay? And I don't remember then the other question.
Let me complete what you said and illustrate it. In short, people that are selling chewing gum in the traffic lights are people that are employed. The people that are accounted as unemployed are people that are under the Mexico Social Security system and are not receiving a wage. So these are very, very few people. So these are the people that are registered at the IMSS but are not actually receiving anything and are looking for a job. So it's a tiny, tiny fraction, 3.5%. But that's not reflect at all the reality of real unemployment in Mexico or not.
Yeah, it's just kind of wondering how they got that number.
But that's the official statistic. I mean, Mexico is one of the countries officially with less unemployment in the whole world.
16% is the real unemployment.
No, officially that's 3.5. That's the official figure.
Yeah.
But the real figure is 16%.
A complete makeup.
Yeah. And can you explain the difference, not the difference, but the people that have formal jobs, those are the people that are jobs in factories, is that right? That's the formal jobs, and government and whatnot. Is that the formal jobs?
Héctor?
The formal jobs or the jobs that...
¿Cuáles son los trabajos formales? La gente que está trabajando en las fábricas, en el sector manufacturero, ¿esos son empleos formales? Sí, ¿no?
Sí, todos. Well, all the people that have a formal relationship in the public sector or in the private sector are formal workers, but even inside this people in the formal sector with formal jobs in the public or private sector, a lot of them have a formal job but with no social security or with no benefits. That's other realities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I'm going to give another figure which is very important. People, they say that Mexico is very good for Mexico because it has provided so many jobs in the manufacturing sector, that is in automobiles and computers, etc. But only all of the jobs in Mexico, including the formal and informal sector, only about 2.4% of jobs in Mexico pertain to the manufacturing sector. So it's a very, very short segment of the total workforce in Mexico. And of the automobile sector, only 0.7% of jobs in Mexico are related to cars. This is important to not overstate the importance of NAFTA in the labor workforce in Mexico.
Hey, can I add something?
Right. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so just so folks understand what a problem this is you can be in the formal sector and your employer, in order to save money, doesn't register that you're working for the employer with the, the equivalent, the Mexican equivalent of the Social Security Administration. And this is one of the things we were fighting with about the labor law reform. The way the labor law bill was written was that to prove how many workers are at the workplace so that you can register to have a union election and verify everything, they wanted to verify that you're registered with your employer in the Social Security system. So if one of the ways that an employer could keep you from forming a union would be, to basically cheat you out of your Social Security by not registering with you. So it's a hard nut to crack, and people who actually know the system really well need to be in there and looking at all of the ways that potentially workers could be left behind. And that's why we believe it's really, really critical. And then I actually have a question, if I could sneak onto the list.
Okay.
Manuel, when you were showing the election results, it showed the PRD is in coalition for this election with the PAN.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why that happened or why that might be of interest? And just for folks who don't know, what is the PRD and what is the PAN, so that people will understand what you're saying? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Perhaps Hector can help too, and it merits a whole new seminar to explain Mexican politics. I'm trying to go back to the slides. Okay, the PAN.
Okay. Let's see.
The PAN is the most conservative, traditionally the most conservative party in Mexico. It's called the National Action Party, and it was the opposition to the PRI along all the decades of PRI's rule. And the PAN was like the right-wing party, basically. And then they won 2 terms. Vicente Fox and Calderón were 2 presidents of the PAN. That was the only intermission that the PRI has had until it came back to the presidency under Peña Nieto. And they did very bad, of course. They just followed the same neoliberal model. And Calderón, in particular, he launched the war on drugs, that has been so bad for Mexico and has provoked hundreds of thousands of people murdered. He also committed fraud against Lopez Obrador in 2006. So the PRI and the PAN, in the end, were seen almost as the same thing, and we called it the PRIAN, like this dual. I don't want to compare it to the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but you can figure that's a little bit like that. And the PRD was the Democratic Revolution Party that came out of the PRI with the figure of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, the son of Lázaro Cárdenas, our best president in the century, who nationalized oil. The PRD was the first big effort along other leftist parties in Mexico that came together, smaller, much smaller, but real leftist parties that joined the PRD. They came together in 86 and created this new opportunity for democracy. This is when I remember when I was very young and really participating in what looked like the first opening for democracy in Mexico. And actually, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, we know that in 86 also won the presidency, and there was also a big fraud by Salinas de Gortari, our most neoliberal and powerful president. And so the PRD continued being, a party. I don't know, Hector, you can complement. It continued being a party that was our alternative for many years. But it started becoming more and more corrupt, and some of the most important figures of the left started leaving the party. And the most important excision, of course, was Lopez Obrador, who a few years ago left the PRD to conform Morena, the National Regeneration Movement Party, and the PRD, and then, well, the PRD being in such shambles, let's say, and the PAN as well. It's a long story, but they finally joined forces in this election because they thought that together they could be an opposition to both the PRI and to Morena. They really bet very high, but it was the worst bet ever, and they lost big. And to put the story short, the PRD today is about to lose its registry, and the PAN is in a very strong internal turmoil, political crisis. So, and the PRI as well. So we're living something very inédit in Mexico, that we're seeing the three main parties that we have only 6 months ago in deep disruption, and Morena taking all over the country. Hector, do you want to say something more about PRD?
No, that's really not. I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that great question.
Yes, thank you for the question, and I'd love to have more time to give more detail about all this. But Mexican politics, I mean, I like to just remark one thing. I don't think that the economic system in Mexico is changing a lot. We will have the same economic system or the same economic power and the neoliberal control of the economy, but we're really changing the political system. This is it's not questionable. I mean, there are some criticism from, for example, the Zapatistas not the Zapatistas, but Subcomandante Marcos under his new disguise, Subcomandante Galeano, that everything will remain the same and so on. But I think the political system in Mexico definitely is changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Radically.
Well, that's good.
Okay, folks, we do have one more question in the queue, if you're ready for that.
Ready.
Okay, caller at area code 219, your line is open.
Yeah, my name's Terry Siegel. I'm in Northwest Indiana, work at the steel mill in East Chicago, ArcelorMittal. And I guess one thing I think we need to try and do here is get a campaign going that people understand, and it's short and sweet and to the point, because NAFTA, all it is legalized corporate slavery in Mexico that's deteriorating wages there and here. And with IDS, all we're doing with that is creating a corporate dictatorship as far as our labor and environmental policies and trade. So we need to think about how we're going to get the message out in a more direct campaign instead of waltzing around some of these issues.
Absolutely. Did y'all want to comment on that, Hector or Manuel?
I just want to give an insight. These are very trying times, and we're very, at the same time that in Mexico, Mexicans are so enthralled and excited about the possibility of change. As I said in my presentation, we also have a lot of constraints and handcuffs. I think that Lopez Obrador's general strategy is, because he's never been an internationalist, but I think his approach is to change things from within Mexico to the outside. So I don't think he wants to put labor issues, labor salaries and wages to be negotiated with Washington and Trump. This is an internal matter, and I think he's really serious about enhancing labor rights and salaries. And the same thing with agriculture. I don't think he wants to change agriculture in Mexico and the fate of peasants and farmers. The debate dealing with the Trump administration. This also has to do with internal Mexico sovereign policies, and I think they're very serious about that. But then you have ISDS, and that is definitely something that has to be done internationally and within the scope of NAFTA. So I think we have to continue our struggles nationally on one hand and internationally on the other. And in terms of ISDS, I think we have to continue our what has been our international alliance. Our international alliance has been in many things: labor, agriculture, but also ISDS. In some, I look forward to continue working with so many people in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada to bring up the best proposals we've had, and make the best advocacy efforts with Lopez Obrador's government.
Thank you. I have a wonder if maybe Hector could comment. I've noticed that the mainstream media likes to depict Lopez Obrador in a similar light to Trump, calling him a nationalist. And I was just wondering, if you could comment on possibly the particular type of nationalism with Lopez Obrador versus the nationalism of Donald Trump, and how we could communicate maybe that difference in our writings and that sort of thing.
Yes, well, that's a big question. But I think, first of all, nationalism in U.S. or in countries like U.S. is radically different from a nationalism in a third world or in a country like Mexico. I think it's very different to be nationalist in U.S. than to be nationalist in Mexico. I think have a very different means. And I think also that the Lopez Obrador nationalism is not even now like the old Mexican nationalism. I think he comes from the nationalist conscience in Mexico, and he really believes in the Mexico development. But I think he now has a new perspective, and he's more open. And I think the Lopez Obrador nationalism will be not an obstacle. In fact, we in the labor movement or in the social movement, we are worried on the contrary sense. I mean, it means that the new government could be too much open to accept the neoliberal globalization politics. That could be a problem. They say that the energy reform will remain, and some other aspects like NAFTA will remain. So I think for the social movement, for the civil society, links between two countries, the nationalism of the Lopez Obrador government will not be difficult, and I don't think the problems between the two countries will be a clash between two nationalisms. I think the Mexican nationalism is not ¿cómo se dice? Una amenaza.
Not the same as the American nationalism, the racist nationalism of the United States.
Mexico's nationalism is not a threat, right?
Right.
Yeah.
To the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I was asking that question because, in the media, the way they like to portray, Lopez Obrador, and I think they're, somewhat trying to compare him to Trump, and they're very different people. So.
Yeah, but the mainstream media really doesn't have a clue because they also want to compare him to Hugo Chavez. And
that's right.
Whether if Hugo Chavez and Trump are the same, then I don't understand anymore.
Yeah.
No, don't worry, Andres Manuel is not like a Trump.
We don't think that. Okay. Well, is there anyone else in the queue?
There is. We do have one more question if there's a little more time.
One more question, and then then we'll have to close. So thank you.
Okay. Caller at area code 727, your line is open.
Yes, this is Reverend Bruce Wright with Refuge Ministries International.
Hi, Bruce. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on this call and start getting more involved again. A couple things. One, I have a radio show that's on 5 radio stations, on predominantly a right-wing radio station, which is awesome that we're on there. I'd love to find out about how to have these gentlemen on to talk about the situation in Mexico. I think it'd be an important show.
Okay,
and then,
I'll hook you up.
Please do.
Okay, great. And then the other question I had was, to what extent are you seeing involvement, and how can we get more involvement from both the student movements in both countries and also especially the religious communities?
Yeah, Manuel, you were talking about already, right? You were right.
About what?
Yeah, the links. I think the question is about how to grow the relationships.
Yes. Yeah, on the religious communities, well, I just have to say that here in Washington we have the wonderful religious communities. I work with something called the Interfaith Working Group on Extractives, and they are very active and present on collaborating and bringing solidarity with communities in resistance all over Latin America. So there's a lot of work there. That's what I can say. And in terms of students, well, I think Hector can say more, but one of the most important movements in Mexico in the last years has been the teachers' movement, because this is one sector that the neoliberal governments have tried to smash. And, of course, the teachers' movement is accompanied by the students' movement. And this is one thing that will be very present in Lopez Obrador's, well, not Lopez Obrador's, in the coming presidential term, in the future of Mexico. There will be definitely the scale back of what's called the education reform in Mexico will be very important, and Lopez Obrador is still insisting that he will just destroy this neoliberal education reform that happened in Mexico. So I think we should find the opportunity to link student movements in the U.S. and in Mexico.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
I want to say that you need to understand that everything is moving in Mexico at all levels, at all society levels, including religious, students, and all the social sectors. And it's a big opportunity, not only the new government, but the new social situation. And it's the moment to increase, to have a boom of relationships between all the different civil society or social sectors, or the different parts of the society to have a relationship, to come to Mexico, to help to the progressive changes, and these changes in Mexico could help also in changes in other regions, right?
I have another question really quick, as I know it's getting late. When it comes to the education system, my understanding is that Lopez Obrador was kind of moving in the direction of privatization. Is that, can you comment on that?
Privatization of education?
Yes.
No, I think that something that, I don't know where you got that from, but one thing that I think Lopez Obrador is very, very strong on is on public education.
Great.
When he was a mayor of Mexico City, he opened a new Mexico City University for the people, completely public. But now he is pledging to open like 100 public universities in Mexico. One of his most important campaign promises is that he will put young people away from streets and in the danger of the drug markets and so on, and the drug mafias, and put young people to study, give them the opportunity to study. I think this is one of the most key elements of Lopez Obrador.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Okay.
I agree. Let me add that the only neoliberal reform that openly Lopez Obrador pronounced against, and he said that he will change, is the educational reform. So I think it's one of the big opportunities to do something in a progressive way.
Right.
That's wonderful. That's not what I had heard. So that's wonderful. Terrific. Okay, great. I think we're going to have to end it there with both Manuel and Hector tonight. I want to thank you both for speaking on our webinar. Of course, you're both welcome to stay with us if you would like to use the chat box. We're just going to be making a few announcements before we close out. I wanted to remind everyone.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're so welcome. And we hope to have you again on our webinar. And hopefully our technology will be a little bit better next time. Thank you so much. We appreciate both of you
Thank
so
you, Harriet.
much. Thank you so much, Manuel. Thank you, Hector.
Un abrazo, Hector. Thank you, Celeste, for being there.
Okay, so I wanted to remind everyone, including our speakers, that we do make YouTube videos of all of our webinars. So Carrie, what she does is she takes the audio and the visual and she mixes them together and she turns them into these YouTube videos. And then we promote those to all of our lists. So that will be really helpful also. And so let's see where we are here.
Got a slide for that?
Yep, and oh yeah, that's right. We do have a slide. I'm
not done
sorry.
yet, Harriet.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, there we go. Okay, moving right along, and we send those out to all of our lists. We have a pretty big list, so people look forward to getting those if they're unable to make it on the webinar. So, and I just wanted to tell you that this is our last webinar of the summer. If you would like to join or advise our team, please let us know. You can email me at harriet@tradejustice.net, and I would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to work with our team, we could really use your help. We normally hold our planning calls every Wednesday evening at 8 Eastern Time, but we are taking a summer break, and then we will resume in September. So we'll be looking for any volunteers to help us at that time. And some of the areas we could use help with are organizing and promoting the webinars themselves, technical support, and ideas for speakers and webinar topics. Also, social media promoters are needed. So you basically get to our planning call on 8 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays beginning in September, and you basically use the same dial-in number that you used tonight. So that 712-770-4160 with the access code 802-787 #. And let's see, if you are inclined, we won't turn you down. If you would like to donate a few dollars, you can just go to our website to donate and just go to tradejustice.net/TJA donate, and you can donate under the Wetlands Active Collective umbrella. So the last thing is, we wanted to thank you so much for joining us here at Trade Justice Alliance Sunday night webinars. We are totally aware that you have choices about where you could be spending your Sunday evening, and we are very honored that you have chosen to spend it here with us. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again this fall. Good night, and thanks. Thank you to the speakers and our friends. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Celeste. Thanks, Hector.
Thanks, everybody.
You, Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harriet.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Alan. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.